with you a bit. I'll probably get emotional because I do just thinking about it. But just pray with me for a second. Dear Heavenly Father, help me to share my words in a way that will bring glory to you. I pray that those who need to hear my story to help them have open ears and open hearts to see your amazing love and provision. Amen. So as many of you know, Dave and I have only been married for 4 years, but we met about 10 and a half years ago. So what I want to share with you this morning is a little bit about my life before Dave was a part of it, because that's something you guys only know us as a couple, but there was lots before that. In 2002, I got married for the very first time when I was 45 years old. And why my life took the path it did and that it took so long to get married was another story for another sermon. But what I did know when I got married the very first time was that I felt I was able to give myself fully into building a healthy, God-centered marriage. I was raised in a church, and I had a very strong faith and years of scriptural study and absolutely knew that Jesus was my best friend. I had lots of stuff that I had worked through emotionally and mentally, and I fully believed in working just as hard in a marriage. The man I married, who I'm going to call my husband, thank you, Cheryl, for that term. It's perfect. He was a Christian, and he had even pastored some small churches. He had a brilliant mind. He was a creative thinker. He loved business as much as I did, and we thrived on intellectual discussions about scriptures and business. And in a lot of ways, we were just a really perfect match. I had spent the prior 23 years of my life building a business from scratch in what was then a male-oriented industry, and it grew into a thriving, self-sufficient machine with wonderful and loyal employees. The year I got married, we were planning another expansion, and I added employees and another small business. My plan was to sell that business in 5 years and then see how God wanted to use all these abilities that He taught me and to take me to a different direction. Along with the husband came 3 stepsons. They were all young adults. The oldest had just returned from the Peace Corps and was finding his life direction, and it was always interesting and exciting where he lived, what he was doing. The youngest had just started college, and after his finishing up his education, he went to live in some third world countries and did some nonprofit work. And the middle son, who was just as talented and brilliant as his brothers, had a few other challenges, and he was serving a 12-year prison sentence. So my first 10 years of my life with him was visiting him in prison visitation rooms with 40 to 50 other prisoners, their families, friends, guards, vending machines, and lots of noise. We would drive 4 to 5 hours each way to spend the few hours that we could with him during that visitation time. And we did that every 3 weeks. So I'm going to tell you that TSA has nothing about pat downs compared to what you get in a prison, and I've been through it about 100 times. So in addition to now having a thriving business, a new husband and 3 stepsons that we saw as often as possible wherever they were in the country, on our very first anniversary, we bought a second home in Cumberland, Maryland. And we had learned early in our dating life that we both wanted a retreat center. It was a place for gathering, a refuge, and for learning for other people. We found an abandoned funeral home, yes, that was originally a 7,000 square foot historic house, and attached to it is another building of equal size with a huge first floor and 4 apartments. And the price was great because we're talking Cumberland, Maryland, depressed city of the state, and it needed tons and tons of remodeling. My forte, right? Okay, but I'm talking about the whole thing needed remodeling. So it was a good price. Big project, right? So we got some heat going in there, we got some mechanicals running, we got some apartments usable, and we said everything else can be broken into projects as we want to move forward. The common question we would hear from everybody is, you bought what? And why the heck would you buy something like that? And our answer was just because we felt we were led to do it. You know, I really felt this is where God wanted us to do. What we were supposed to do with this, how we were going to handle it, what was going to become of it, was an open book, being business people. Gosh, did we have fun scheming. So we saw so many possibilities, but we really did not know the whole reasons we were supposed to buy this. It was very, very well used for the first 10 years that we owned it. And we were up there almost every single weekend. And once my husband started his own business, he was up there a lot during the weeks. We had some people that we knew who suddenly needed places to live, so they would be in an apartment or the third floor of the house. So we were caring for people. We had Thanksgiving there every year, 20 people for a weekend, and they'd still get lost in the buildings, and then 30 to 40 people for Thanksgiving dinner. Memories and fun. I can't even begin to tell you everything that was going on. We had business retreats, we had church retreats. It was a nonstop place of activity, in spite of the fact it still needed all this remodeling, or sometimes they were helping us with the remodeling. It was like, oh, we're doing a project. We get a crew in, and they would be helping us. So, you know, perfection of space was not required. Good times and a willful spirit was. We even were on HGTV. Thank you. I'm a TV star. HGTV's If Walls Could Talk. They did an episode on us, which was also fun. There is such a story about this house with the history of it and everything else that just drew the attention of the TV. And I'm going to tell you that the story of this house has not ended. God knows the end. I wish I did at this point in time because I still own it. And after broken pipes 18 months ago, the whole house is still in remodeling. So it's another story and a chapter that I have to just walk in faith on. So all of that combined, plus some fun traveling mixed in, our lives were very fast, furious, and quite honestly, a lot of fun. But beneath it all, we had problems. And we were two broken people. Honestly, I actually believe all of us are broken. But my belief in marriage is that if a marriage is centered on God, it's two broken people coming together, working through your brokenness, and together as two parts you make a whole. And God is the center of it. And it's what, Mark 10, 8, and 9 says, "And the two shall become one flesh. Then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate." That was, and it still is, my belief in a God-centered marriage. Unfortunately, the broken pieces with my husband and I weren't working very well. We weren't fitting them together very well because it does take two people putting it before God to make it work. And that wasn't happening. By 2008, which was about 6 years into our marriage, all aspects of our lives started changing. Do you all remember the housing crisis we had? That they kind of say is around 2010. Well, it isn't a flip of a switch. Kind of, you can see it. We saw it starting in 2006 and 2007 because my finances and my business I was seeing was flatlining. That is a red flag for me. We lost a few employees because of, for various reasons, retirements, or they move on, and I decided not to replace them. By the beginning of 2008, I was adjusting hours and letting non-essential people go. My lease came up for renewal on my 7,000 square foot design center, downscaled to 2,000, got let go of non-essential employees. I was down to 4 to 5 employees when I was originally 12, just a couple years ago. I'm going to tell you that downsizing a company, if you are close to your employees, is like killing your family, because they are family to you. If any of you have been in that situation or in management where the people are really important to you and they've given everything to build something, when you have to let them go, even though in the housing crisis we knew it wasn't my fault, I saw companies closing left and right, and we were all just flabbergasted because my industry was crucified. All of us who support the remodeling industry were crucified by it. It is just devastating. People trust you. You've invested into them, they've invested, and when you have to let them go, you know it's affecting their lives, because it's not a great time to be looking for a job. And so emotionally, this just killed me. I put them first, I paid them, I didn't pay me, I just got as creative as I could to make sure those who were dependent, like maybe they were the sole earners, had the jobs the longest, had opportunities to find new opportunities. I did everything to try to make it the easiest on them and took the biggest hit, emotionally and financially. It's one of the reasons I never want to build another company again. It's like PSTD of letting employees go. But it did hit me really, really hard financially. The investment money in my husband's company had dried up, so he didn't have any revenues. He was dependent on what I could do. We had 2 houses to keep up and everything that comes with all of that. Sold all of our extra vehicles. We had too many, so yeah, that was easy, right? No big deal. But the hard part was we really couldn't afford the 2 houses that we had. We had the one in Annapolis that was my first house, which I had completely remodeled over the course of 20-some years, and it was cute. Not big, cute. We had our monster out in Cumberland, and a housing crisis in a recession. Cumberland's not where you try to sell a piece of property like that. So guess what? The Annapolis house had to go. So thanks to the housing crisis, all the equity was gone. No money came out of the house. So where do we live? I still had to be in Annapolis. He could be back and forth because sometimes he needed to be in Annapolis. But we needed a place to live. You know, and you can't buy a new house. You can't, apartment rental is the same as mortgages, and you can't live indefinitely in somebody else's house, you know, in somebody's bedroom. So it was, had to come up with some really, really creative and prayerful solution. One day I realized that there was a mobile home park in Arnold, Maryland. And I don't know if any of you know this, but this might have been my stomping grounds for like 20 years. But you know the golf center in Arnold, Maryland on Ritchie Highway? Anybody know that area? There's a mobile home park next to there. It's a little teeny street with like 20 little mobile homes in there. And I drove down it, and the very last mobile home, probably the oldest one and the smallest, had a for sale sign by owner. Now, who would have ever thought? I was certainly surprised. This little mobile home was 700 square feet. And that's with the addition on it. So, you know, so we had at least smartly put some cash in a safe for that emergency fund, and this was the emergency. So we took that, bought this little mobile home, 1978, still in original condition, and I bought a lot of paint, vinyl for the flooring, and pulled out cabinetry out of my showroom, and I remodeled the interior. And made it into what felt like a little teeny beach tiny house. So I was thankful we had a place to live cheaply. But I'm going to tell you, it's also a very humbling experience when you have to do that. Because here I am, a high-end kitchen and bath designer, and most people spend more than that. You know, I probably had $12,000 to $14,000 into this place, bought and remodeled. And most people spend more money than that on appliances. You know, sometimes one appliance can cost more than that. And so here I'm trying to service clients when I had them, because it was a bad time, and not like say, well, oh, I bet you have a great kitchen. So, you know, it's like, how do you skirt those kinds of questions? But meantime, remember when I told you the marriage wasn't doing great. So before we even got to the mobile home spot, the fall of 2009, I think it was October, my husband one day walked into the room and said, I want a divorce. And I just was like, what? You know, it just was sort of a surprise and a shock to me. And he didn't say, oh, and I'm moving out or anything after that. It was just like, I want a divorce. Well, it's like, okay, but there was no action behind it. So I really saw it as a cry for help. And I would plead him to talk with me. I'd plead him to do counseling. Of course, I was talking to God. Things didn't really change, but there was no action or behavior or any movement beyond it. So we went through the holidays. In fact, we were traveling with the oldest stepson, his wife, her family. Things weren't horrible. They weren't super comfortable, but we were just sort of managing through, and I thought, well, we'll see what we can do here. And then February of 2010. Does anybody remember the snowstorm that we had that year? In Annapolis, we had 2 30-inch dumps in 1 week. Okay, so, and I don't know what you had here on the shore, how bad it was. Well, we knew that the storm was coming, so the husband went to Cumberland with a snowblower. I stayed in Annapolis with a shovel. And that's how we handled the storm. But sometime during the beginning of that week, and I honestly can't remember if it was before the first snow or right after or in between, I picked up the mail out of the mailbox, and there was a letter from an attorney who was asking for my business. And a lawsuit had been set up in the courts for my husband against me about divorce. And I'm going to tell you that I went pretty numb. I obviously called him on the phone. He says, oh, in the middle of January, I went into the courts and filed the papers, and I have until the end of March to serve you. I'm like, but of course you didn't tell me. This is how I found out. I'm going to tell you I don't remember a whole lot about that week, except for a heck of a lot of snow, laying on a couch looking at a ceiling, and a lot of conversation with God. And that first night, as I was numb, I heard a loud voice over my shoulder. And I know some people have occasionally had this where that voice hits you and you want to whip your head around. It doesn't come often and you can't predict it. But what that voice said was, love him through this. Now, I am kind of numb at this point in time, and I'm sitting here, love him through this. I don't even know what that means or how to do that. But you know what my second immediate thought was that? Because you love me, God. And there was a peace in those words. And there was a piece that said, didn't say it was going to be easy, didn't even say it was going to survive. But it said, this is my action I need to do. So what I did is, of course, I'm trying to figure out what that is. I managed to get a couple of books. I was looking for good support systems to kind of learn how to handle this. And there's a couple of books I got. First of all, this book, Sacred Marriage, I recommend. It's a really cool book about what marriage is supposed to look like in a God-centered marriage. And we all get married because we're in love, we think we're going to be happy and all that kind of stuff. Marriage in a God-centered marriage is more about holiness. It's about making you holier, changing you from the inside to be more Christ-like, which is not easy. It's not about all the happiness that we think. It's about becoming more holy in the presence of the Lord. And then the other book I got, which was really great, is called Love and Respect. And this is a Bible study book. This talks about how men and women are different and what they need from the marriage is different. And it teaches a lot along those lines. And when I read that book, I saw a lot of the things that I was doing wrong and in the marriage, and how if I changed certain parts of my attitudes, at least I would be doing what I could do, and how I could change my behaviors, my communication, and try to still honor him in spite of all this pain. So that's the direction I went. And so all of this happened right about the time that we discovered we needed the mobile home. So, and then by the August 10th, 2010, I had the remodeling done, and we both moved into the mobile home. I asked him, are you moving in with me? And he said, yes. So I'm thinking maybe we still have the ability to work through this. The other thing that was happening, that finances, the business still hadn't started turning around yet. By this last half of the 2010, my income revenues in the business had dropped by 80%. So I'm now trying to run a business and live off of 20% of what I'm used to. Now, obviously, my employees had scaled way down. I was down to about 2 at that point in time. But probably the worst week financially was one week when the husband was in Cumberland and I had $50 to my name, credit cards were maxed out, and I said I need gas in the car and I have an empty refrigerator. But what I had was a stock of SpaghettiOs and peanut butter in the cabinet. And so that's what I ate for a week. Now, another challenge was happening in the background of all of this. The stepson in prison was about to come out. So he needed to come visit with us and live with us up in Cumberland. He had his own challenges that he had to deal with. And after 12 years, there's challenges in that direction. Then there's the challenges that landed him in prison. He needed us financially, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. We needed to be united on how we worked with him, but we weren't very united behind the scenes. But we got through it. It was a little rough for a couple of years. I am going to tell you that right now I am so proud of him because he has stayed out. We have a great relationship, which I'll talk about a little bit later, just mention it. But he has survived all of these challenges and controls them, deals with them, and I'm very proud of the man he's become. So that's a good story through all of this. He has his own story, let me put it that way. The marriage really didn't get any better. By 2011, and life in Cumberland was still a little uncomfortable because of everything that was going on. By 2012, we decided we needed some more emotional space in the relationship. And so I moved in with a girlfriend who had an extra bedroom and let him stay in that little mobile home. Then a couple months later, 4th of July, 2012, which was 12 years ago, there was another little mobile home that came on the market, and I bought that one. And that one became mine. So that I now had a place to live long term because I had no idea what the future was. Excuse me real quick. So this one was a little bit bigger. It was 1,200 square feet. So hey, it had 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And it was, by the time I got done with it, because again, I remodeled it, business was starting to trickle back in, so I had a little bit more cash flow. I remodeled that sucker head to toe, and it was a little jewel box. I figured if we ever got back together, well, guess what? That's the size of a small house. We could have that one. We could even have the one in the back, for his office, and at least we'd have a place to live, and it was better than 700 square feet. And so you just have to plan for all options that are going to happen in the future. I will tell you, though, that after painting 2 mobile homes inside and out, 4 coats of paint, painting is no longer my favorite thing to do, even though I'll do it, but that was that did me in. I had still hoped to salvage the marriage, but I was losing hope rather quickly. But the best part of my day was between 5:30 and 7:30 every morning. And I would sit in my favorite chair and I would read my Bible, and I would read all kinds of biblically based books, and I would talk to God and I would listen. All along this journey since 2010, when he told me to love my husband, I would ask God what he wanted me to do because I needed to know how that would look in this relationship. I didn't file for divorce, even though my friends said, "Why aren't you doing that?" I didn't leave him. I gave him this space, but I didn't officially leave him, as you know what I mean. I made sure he was handled financially, had what he needed. And I waited. And I just waited on God because I know that God's ways are not our ways. And his timing is not our timing. So I just waited and I let God direct every single day. I had no idea what it was going to look like, one day at a time. I was in a situation where I had no idea if I'd ever be able to live in what I call a regular home again. I had no idea if my business was going to survive. All the changes that were happening in the marketplace or rebuild enough to sustain itself. Selling it had been my retirement plan, so that was gone. I had no idea if my husband was going to come back to me, and if he didn't, what was going to happen to the lives I had with the 3 stepsons, because they really had no idea what was going on and why or the situation. And now we're talking about some wives involved and grandkids. So I anticipated I was going to lose what I would call my entire family with a divorce. I had no control over it. Those are things we can't force. Basically, 12 years ago, I lost almost everything, with the exception of a monster house in Cumberland, which is a money pit, and I had my faith. And I had a choice. And that choice was to wake up every morning and to try to find joy and to trust in the Lord. And the verses that Joyce read, or actually Maureen read, those are the verses I had to live every single day. I had a choice to live not only a life of faith, but a life in faith. That's why I've titled the sermon thus. I had to trust my best friend, who was Jesus, and I had to believe that my joy was going to be in him and not the circumstances or possessions of life. And so that's what I did. And I continued to live generously through all of this, because I had learned from years ago that tithing, and if I cared more for others than my own financial security, that God always met my needs. And it usually met my needs in abundance. So through all these hard times, even though it was scary, I didn't stop giving generously whenever I felt God led me to. And he lets you know when you need to. It might be somebody you know has a special need. It might be a church. But when he asked me to do something, I did it in spite of the fact that I needed all those funds myself. God has proven himself faithful to me time and time again with his abundant blessings, and I believed he would get me through all of this again. The fall of 2013, 4 years after my husband had asked for the divorce, I felt God gave me the approval to let him go, and I let him have the divorce. Within 2 months, it was over, through the courts, no attorney, simple decision, signed and notarized, and it was over. And if that wasn't a blessing, how easily that happened, that was amazing. Remember that song, Jesus Take the Wheel? That's sort of where I was at, because while the divorce was over, I still didn't know what the future was going to look like. Then, January 2014 comes, 1 month later, and I meet him. And I'm going to tell you that we could have another sermon about how God has worked in the lives of us two for the last 10 and a half years. But I do want to share with you today that I have a marriage with Dave that's based in this book. And the things I learned in this book helped get me there. And I think we have a wonderful relationship. And for the first time in my life, I have a true partner. And I am blessed by this man every single day of my life. My stepsons, their wives, now 4 grandchildren are all in our lives. We have a great relationship with them. And they love him. He's grandpa. And some of them are coming Thursday. Remember, one of them was helped with the fence last summer? Well, he's coming with his sister and his mom Thursday. They'll be here for a long weekend. Needless to say, we're kind of happy. We have a blast with them. My business survived and revived. You know, it's not what it was. I don't want it what it was, but it thrives. It fulfills me, and God has blessed me through it, and it's still in his hands. So when he tells me I get to retire, I do. I don't know when that is, but it's up to him. And then in 2018, beyond our wildest dreams, we moved here. I mean, we live in paradise, and we live on the water. And we belong to this church with the most amazing friends I have ever had. And I can tell you that I am happier today than I've ever been in my entire life through all of this. And I know where it comes from, because it comes from here. So thank you, Jesus. You were my best friend. And that's a little bit about my story. So I want to share with you, but there's 2 Proverbs I just want to share with you. Proverbs 17:3. In the same way that gold and silver are refined by fire, the Lord purifies your heart by the tests and trials of life. And Proverbs 3:5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Thank you.